In ancient Greece in 1200 BC, the brutal king Amphitrion of Tiryns waged wars everywhere, solely to gain more cities and wealth. Before him stood a magnificent city belonging to King Galenus of Argos. Facing the overwhelming Tiryns' army, Galenus' tens of thousands of troops retreated continuously, eventually finding themselves trapped in the city's central square with no way out. Amphitrion rode out from his massive army on his warhorse, his powerful presence overwhelming the Argos forces, who dared not release their drawn bows. Galenus then appeared, knowing that his country stood no chance against the vastly superior enemy forces. The only hope was a duel between kings to possibly save his people. Amphitrion, holding his longsword, dismounted directly, his icy gaze fixed on Galenus, who sought to challenge him. He then loudly declared, "If you can defeat me, you will gain control of the city and its soldiers." Facing this sole hope, Galenus had no reason to refuse.
King Amphitrion, I accept your challenge. Prepare to die!
As soon as the two kings engaged, they displayed their full strength, each movement filled with power and speed. The soldiers from both sides watched the battle nervously, their hearts pounding whenever their king seemed to falter. True to his title as the King of Slaughter, Amphitrion quickly overpowered Galenus. To demonstrate his overwhelming strength, he discarded his weapon and fought barehanded. Even so, Galenus was no match for him. Amphitrion single-handedly pinned Galenus to the ground by the throat and delivered a lethal sword strike, ending the king's life. Thus, a grand campaign of aggression came to a close. However, upon his triumphant return, Amphitrion faced reproach from Queen Alcmene, for Galenus had been a benevolent ruler whose land contained a gold mine, attracting Amphitryon's ruthless slaughter. Amphitrion dismissed Alcmene's accusations with a smile, asserting that war was built on countless lives. His vision was to become the strongest king on the continent, and he was willing to sacrifice millions to achieve this great goal, regardless of the cost. Alcmene knew that words alone could not change anything, so she placed her hope in the gods she worshipped. Years of warfare and endless taxation had left the mortal world littered with corpses and filled with grievances. The gods who created humans surely did not wish to see this either. Alcmene poured out the sufferings of the world before a statue of the goddess Hera, and to her surprise, Hera herself appeared in the temple. As a goddess of marriage and childbirth, Hera could not stop the mortal wars, but she could plant a child in Alcmene's womb to overthrow the tyranny and restore peace. Without hesitation, Alcmene agreed to Hera's request, even if it meant bearing the stigma of infidelity. That very night, she offered her body, and the recipient of her offering was none other than Zeus, the king of the gods and the lord of thunder. When Amphitryon arrived at Alcmene's chamber with a concubine, he happened to witness an infuriating scene. Unfortunately, he did not notice the presence of any man, only knowing that Alcmene had betrayed him. In his rage, he left the palace and gathered his army to hunt down an intruder who had sneaked into the royal palace. However, Zeus, the king of the gods, sent down a bolt of lightning as a warning, and ultimately, this shameful matter had to be quietly dropped. After all, if the soldiers were to learn of this disgrace, Amphitryon's prestige would be greatly diminished. Soon after, Alcmene gave birth to the child in her womb. Amphitryon did not kill the boy immediately, but instead granted him the title of second prince. Of course, all of this was merely nominal. One day, he would take everything back, including the young boy's life, to make Alcmene regret her betrayal. Time passed, and 20 years later, the second prince, Hercules, had grown into a strong young man. He had fallen in love at first sight with Princess Hebe of a neighboring country, and the two were now meeting in the forest, swearing eternal love to each other.
Something?
As they were immersed in their deep affection, an uninvited guest suddenly intruded, none other than the crown prince of Tiryns, Iphicles. Iphicles was very displeased with their behavior. As the princess of the neighboring kingdom of Crete, Hebe should marry him, the heir to the throne, not this neglected second prince. Although they were brothers from the same mother, Iphicles had never treated Hercules with any respect, constantly bullying and tormenting him since childhood. Upon returning to the royal city, he was determined to have his father discipline his younger brother severely. As expected, upon returning to the palace, Amphitrion announced a major decision. If the kingdom of Crete wanted the protection of Tiryns, they must marry Princess Hebe to his heir, the crown prince Iphicles. The king of Crete did not have the courage to refuse, knowing full well the brutality of Amphitryon, who could destroy the country at the slightest provocation. Hercules was stunned upon hearing this news, but did not dare to object. He knew how much his father despised him, and that none of his requests would ever be granted. Seeing her beloved man's lack of reaction, Hebe ran out of the palace in tears. Hercules immediately mounted his horse and chased after her, not expecting that Hebe loved him so deeply that she would rather die than marry Iphicles. Since they could not change the will of the two kings, they could only change themselves. The only path left was to flee far away. However, Amphitryon would not let things go as Hercules wished. Especially since Hercules was not his biological son, he immediately dispatched a squad to capture them. In the palace, Amphitryon wasted no words and directly assigned Hercules a life-threatening mission. He had to cross the Nile River and quell a rebellion in a southern city. This was Hercules' first time leading troops into battle, and his forces were halved, making survival uncertain and dependent on their skills and luck. To prove his love for Hebe, Hercules agreed without hesitation. However, his mother was extremely worried, suspecting that the king was using this as a way to kill Hercules. She earnestly advised her son not to act impulsively for a woman, as there was a task in this world more important than love. Unfortunately, the love-struck Hercules could not heed her words. Left with no choice, Alcman had to tell him the truth.
What did you call me?
You are not the son of Amphitryon. I swear upon my love for you. You are Hercules, gift of Hera, son of Zeus.
The next day, Hercules led his troops out for the first time. Before leaving, he bid farewell to Hebe.
Ladies! And you will be marrying me 3 moons from now.
But all of this was Amphitryon's plot to get rid of Hercules. As they entered a cave, they were ambushed by Egyptian soldiers. Accompanying Hercules was the battle-hardened Captain Satyrus, who quickly organized a shield formation for defense.
Battle formation!
However, the enemy's numbers continued to grow, while their own troops numbered only 80. Hercules and the captain led the charge into the enemy ranks, and the soldiers from both sides clashed fiercely. Each attack and defense was a matter of life and death, stirring the blood. At that moment, a soldier fired a piercing arrow that nearly killed Hercules, but his prince's helmet saved him. Hercules then turned fiercely and killed all the archers. Although this was Hercules' first time fighting enemies on the battlefield, he was, after all, of Zeus's bloodline. Even though his divine power had not yet awakened, he was not someone ordinary soldiers could match. Unfortunately, as time passed, their soldiers fell one by one until only Hercules and the captain remained standing on the battlefield. Seeing their tenacity, the enemy general waved his arm, and dozens more soldiers charged onto the battlefield. In single combat, perhaps no one was their match, but they could be worn down and killed through attrition. After a few rounds, the two were finally subdued. The enemy general did not immediately kill them, but picked up the prince's helmet from the ground and asked the captain where the second prince was. The captain immediately said, "The corpse at your feet is Hercules." The enemy general immediately ordered a soldier to present this helmet to Amphitryon to collect the reward. It turned out that this expedition was Amphitryon's conspiracy. No wonder they were given only 80 soldiers to quell the rebellion, and no wonder the enemy could precisely locate their position. Hercules thought he would surely die that day, but he did not expect the enemy general to see value in their strength and decide to sell them as slaves. When the news of Hercules' death reached Tiryns, The most grieved were Alcmene and Hebe. As for Amphitrion, he showed no emotion and even hypocritically held a grand funeral for Hercules. He had waited a long time for this day. He wanted Alcmene to see with her own eyes the tragic death of the son she had raised for 20 years, to avenge the hatred in his heart. Even if the son was of Zeus's bloodline, as the king of slaughter in the mortal world, he still feared nothing. Meanwhile, in a dark and damp underground arena, Hercules participated in his first duel as a slave. He could only prove his worth by winning the match. Failure would mean death. His opponent was a man even stronger than himself. A heavy left hook knocked him into the mud, and the opponent followed up, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to Hercules. However, Hercules was no ordinary man. He knew he was the son of Zeus, the king of the gods. Although he had not yet been granted divine power by the god king, his body was truly that of a demigod. When he unleashed his potential, it would be a terrifying sight. Hercules and the captain went on to win every match, eventually earning the qualification to compete in the Greek finals held in Tiryns. Since Hercules was participating as a slave and the captain was injured in the previous match, Hercules had to face 6 warriors alone in the final. The 7 men stood menacingly in the center of the arena, their gazes sharp as knives, seemingly cutting into each other's souls. Hercules struck first, moving swiftly on his feet, while the 6 warriors opposite him swung their weapons to meet his attack. At this moment, Hercules was as fierce as a god descending from heaven, for winning this duel would grant him freedom from his slave master. He could then go in search of his beloved Hebe and stop her wedding to Iphicles. Therefore, he had every reason not to lose this duel. Under Hercules' relentless assault, the 6 formidable warriors all fell, leaving him the sole radiant figure in the arena. After Hercules' victory, the captain brought good news. Not only had he recalled soldiers loyal to him, but he had also invited Hercules' teacher, Chiron. Now, under the rule of Amphitrion and Iphicles, Tiryns was in a state of despair. The army plundered wealth everywhere, burning, killing, and looting, while the people suffered greatly but could do nothing. The captain suggested forming an alliance with those who opposed the tyranny to overthrow the debauched state. However, Hercules had no such grand ambitions. He only wished to be with his beloved. But Chiron's next words completely changed his naive thoughts. On the day of the funeral, Alcmene knew that Hercules' death was inseparable from Amphitrion's schemes. Seeing his plot exposed, Amphitryon, in a fit of rage, stabbed her to death. At this moment, the anger in Hercules' heart could no longer be suppressed. Not only had Amphitryon set a trap to kill him, but now even his mother had fallen victim to his poisonous hand. If Hercules continued to hesitate and be timid, he would truly be unworthy of being a man. Hercules immediately divided his forces with the captain. He was responsible for going to the village to rescue the oppressed civilians, for he who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. Meanwhile, the captain was to contact friends within the army to launch a coordinated attack from both inside and outside, breaking through the palace's defenses in one fell swoop. However, Hercules and the captain's movements were soon exposed. It was difficult for Amphitryon, as the ruler of the country, not to notice such a large-scale rebellion and winning over of soldiers. As for their actions, he did not take them seriously but found them ridiculous. In the face of overwhelming power, all conspiracies and tricks were in vain. Moreover, Amphitryon had 3 armies on their way to reinforce him. Amphitryon used a conspiracy to capture Hercules and his companions.
Break him away! Take Soteris and execute the others!
In order to completely defeat Heracles, Iphicles even publicly killed Chiron.
Strike this affliction from our land.
As the son of Zeus, Hercules finally erupted in the face of his own and his comrades' life and death situation.
Father! I believe in you! Grant me strength!
After receiving his son's call, Zeus immediately bestowed upon him a mighty divine power. Although this son was born of a mortal and had no right to reside on Mount Olympus, he was not someone that mortal emperors could humiliate at will. With the divine power granted, Hercules, wielding a heavy stone pillar in each hand, advanced towards the king's guards. The heavy stone pillars swiftly moved in his hands, and the soldiers often fell before they could even approach his body. As for Amphitrion and Iphicles, seeing the situation turn unfavorable, they turned and mounted their horses to flee back to the royal city. They knew well that Hercules, who had just gained divine power, was not someone they could currently resist. Only by returning to the royal city and gathering the army could they encircle and suppress him. This one-sided battle ended very quickly. At this moment, Hercules, somewhat dazed, suddenly knelt before Chiron, who lay on the ground, gazing sorrowfully at this teacher who had taught him for 20 years. Now, the people closest to Hercules, his mother and teacher, had all died at the hands of Amphitrion. Hercules swore to make these rulers pay with their blood. Soon, under his call, even many elderly people joined his ranks. Hercules, clad in armor at the forefront of the army, promised in a loud voice to all the soldiers, "I will lead everyone to reclaim what belongs to us. I am no longer the prince of Tiryns, but the son of Zeus, the king of Olympus. With the support of the gods, this battle will surely be victorious." Under the cover of night, this army arrived beneath the royal city. However, countless archers were already stationed on the city walls, ready to kill them all at any moment. Hercules stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal his true face. Now, all of Tiryns knew that he was the son of Zeus, sent by the gods to punish Amphitryon. If Amphitryon were not a tyrant, these soldiers of Tiryns might have chosen to defend their homeland. But Amphitryon was not only debauched, but also colluded with foreign armies to harm his own people. Discontented, they chose to defect without hesitation. At this moment, an army emerging from the royal city was from Egypt.
Lower your aim! Fire! We are with you, Hercules!
The rebel army broke through the royal city's defenses like a tidal wave, surrounding Amphitryon's palace. However, Amphitryon was not overly panicked at this moment. Instead, he personally came out to welcome Hercules' arrival and even prepared a special gift for him. A bundle of torches flew towards the front of the rebel army, and from all directions, several armies emerged. They were from Egypt, Germania, and Africa. This was the reason why Amphitryon was unafraid of Hercules. He could turn all his soldiers against him, but his true trump cards came from outside. Facing an enemy many times their number, Hercules stepped forward and demanded a duel with Amphitryon, a contest of champions where the victor would gain all the city's wealth and soldiers, and the loser would disappear from this world. This was Amphitryon's usual strategy for conquering all directions. However, when someone else proposed it to him, he refused without hesitation. Now that he had the advantages of time, geography, and people, he only needed to give the order, and these rebels would be annihilated. There was no need to take risks and give them a chance to survive. As for the honor of a warrior, it was a joke in his eyes. Facing such a shameless Amphitryon, Hercules was filled with anger. He had wanted a fair duel with the other party, but the opponent did not play by the rules at all, and even colluded with external forces to try to annihilate them. Since that was the case, he would have to rely on the power of Zeus. Suddenly, the sky was filled with lightning and thunder, and a huge bolt of lightning struck Hercules' long sword. This was a thunderous power bestowed upon him by his father to help him eliminate all evil and injustice in the world. The power of thunder swept away all enemies like autumn winds sweeping fallen leaves. The three armies did not even have much of a struggle before they perished for a tyrant in a foreign land. Seeing the situation turn bad, Amphitryon immediately fled back to the palace. So this was the divine power of Zeus that he had always looked down upon. Hercules also followed him to the palace. Although this man was his nominal father, he could not let the great vengeance for his mother and teacher go unavenged. Suddenly, Hercules launched a thunderous attack at Amphitryon. Amphitryon dodged to the side and swung a heavy sword. In the first round of confrontation, Hercules was at a disadvantage. After all, the title of the King of Slaughter was not in vain. He had once conquered the surrounding countries with absolute strength and could even kill tigers, leopards, and wolves with his bare hands. Facing this rising star, he was quite at ease. After a few rounds of confrontation, Hercules lay on the ground in disarray. Amphitryon immediately switched to a giant axe, intending to kill his opponent with absolute advantage. Hercules quickly got up to avoid the fierce attack, and then took advantage of Amphitrion's carelessness, wrapping his iron arms tightly around his neck. At this moment, Iphicles suddenly appeared in the palace. He had kidnapped Hebe as a hostage. Iphicles had no extra words and directly asked Hercules to put down his weapon and surrender. For a moment, Hercules did not know how to choose. On one side was his sworn enemy, and on the other was his beloved lover. Princess Hebe saw her lover's dilemma. She did not want to drag him into danger, so she resolutely stabbed herself with a dagger, taking Iphicles down with her. Amphitryon saw Hercules standing stunned and launched a sudden attack with a long knife. Hercules had long anticipated that the other party would not sit still and turned his hand to hold the sword to confront him again. But this time, the power he unleashed was too strong. Amphitryon did not even last 2 rounds because at this moment, what was brewing in Hercules' body was not only the power of a demigod, but also the surging power of anger. In the end, Hercules used the dagger with which Amphitryon had killed his mother to end his sinful life. The princess, who was stabbed in a vital spot, did not die but had a child of love with Hercules. Finally, under the leadership of Hercules, the Greek people lived a happy and peaceful life from then on.